I, like so many people, hid my mess for so much of my life. My background really is a mix of trauma right at birth. Medical trauma was part of my background. I essentially have not known a life without pain. I also grew up in a household with a father who was an alcoholic and verbally abusive to my mom. I just grew up learning how to hide my own pain. And for me, all of that early stuff led me to tons of survival mechanisms, survival things like drinking at a very young age, promiscuity, very much a lifetime looking for love in all of the wrong places. And so, with that, my secrets piled up. I had the mess that happened to me, but then I also had the mess that I created as I was trying to survive. And all of that mess for me became secrets that really were eating me from the inside out and causing me to continue to spiral.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about embracing the messiness of becoming. I'm delighted to welcome Meghann Dawson. Meghann is a certified empowerment coach, transformational speaker, and the host of Becoming is Messy. You can reach Meghann at her website, meghannDawson.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Meghann. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Oh, thank you, Linda. I am so happy to be here. Really looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you. And I love this topic, that
Thank you.
life is messy. And
Yes.
if we expect it to be something different, we end up being really surprised and we have a whole lot of unmet expectations and frustration. So is it okay if we start with your messy story?
Of course, yes. So I, like so many people, hid my mess for so much of my life, and probably until I was about 30. I think I didn't share my story, and my background really is a mix of trauma right at birth. I caught an infection at birth. I was born to a teenage mom, and in my premature birth, caught an infection right there in the hospital, which wreaked havoc on my little body. And so I essentially have not known a life without pain, without hospitals and surgeries. All of my joints were mangled by an infection. And so I've had some very severe medical procedures across my life, including limb lengthening and limb adjustments and hip replacement in my middle adulthood. So very much medical trauma was part of my background. I also grew up in a household with a father who was an alcoholic and verbally abusive to my mom. I was the oldest daughter in our household, the oldest sibling. I had two younger brothers. And so, for those listeners listening that have that oldest daughter syndrome, I very much that person that grew up feeling like I was the adult of the household. My mom would come into my bedroom crying after fights with my dad and curl into bed with me, her and my brothers. And so I was really kind of, their caretaker and in showing them love. And so I just grew up learning how to hide my own pain and how to wear a smile on my face. And I never really wanted to rock the boat. And for me, all of that early stuff led me to tons of survival mechanisms, survival things like drinking at a very young age, promiscuity, very much a lifetime looking for love in all of the wrong places. And so, with that, my secrets piled up. I had the mess that happened to me, but then I also had the mess that I created as I was trying to survive. And all of that mess for me became secrets that really were eating me from the inside out and causing me to continue to spiral until I was nursing my newborn baby. After years of infertility, I felt blessed to have the miracle of motherhood. And I was nursing my daughter when I was in my early 30s. And I just had, in the stillness of night, had this inner voice that I heard loud and clear telling me that I needed to do better, that I needed to get myself in a position to lead my life and stop playing victim. Otherwise, I was going to pass the same wounds down to my daughter. And so for me, that was kind of a turning point that led me to who I am today, all these years later, a framework that is essentially the steps that I followed to reclaim my life and own my whole story.
Meghann, that is amazing. Your story is amazing. And I know that what we've talked about or what you've shared so far is only a piece of it.
Mm.
But I just want to make a couple comments. One, as I'm listening to the pain and the frustration, and
Mm.
I'm looking at your beautiful face with this big smile.
Mm.
And I just think it's almost miraculous. I'm not sure if there's a better word to be able to get to a place where you can describe the messiness of your life
Yep.
without falling apart in tears, but
Mhm.
to be able to smile and
Mm.
say, this did happen to me and this
Mhm.
happened for me,
Yes.
but I'm not going to stay in this place of victimhood anymore.
Yes.
I am going to choose to do something better and to be something better. And you obviously have, because I
Yep.
can see it in your face
Thank
and
you.
I can hear it in your voice. And so I just pause for a second. Anyone who is listening, if you're struggling with something, because we all are, our desire is for you to be able to get to a place where you can learn the lessons of your life and be joyful
Mhm.
and move forward. We want to live a joyful life. We have a mess. We can't pretend that there's not going to be
That's right.
mess, but we don't want to stay there. Okay.
Yes.
And I loved so much. You talked about that there are messes that happen to us and there are messes we create. And there was one mess that happened to you that you did not mention, but it was unusual enough. And I think something that we don't address enough. I hope it's okay if I bring this up.
Please. Yes.
And it was NPE trauma,
Yes.
not parent expected.
That's right.
So, would
Yes.
you mind expounding on that just a little bit?
Yes.
Because I think with DNA tests, that's coming up more and more, and it can kind of pull the rug out from under you with
Very much
what
so.
is the story that you've always understood and accepted. We got to make a new story.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I do have seven competencies that I coach, that I speak about, that were born from, overcoming kind of that childhood wound. And I thought I had cracked life's secret, and I thought it would be smooth sailing. I had this framework, and I was following those competencies. I was actually sitting with my girlfriends close to my 40th birthday, and I said, "Gosh, the rest of my life is going to be so boring." The first part was such an upheaval, and now I'm in a healthy, loving relationship. My family's doing so great. And the universe kind of, I think, heard that and said, nope, not so fast. And soon after, I had a mix of tragic things happen in my life, as we all do. And one of them was losing my grandfather, sitting with the father figure in my life who meant the most to me, and sitting with him as he passed away. And then very shortly after, I did a ancestry.com test to see my heritage and learn about the different makeups of countries I came from. And it unlocked a 40-year-old secret for our family, which was that the father that raised me was not my biological father. And with that, it was an unraveling at the deepest part of my identity. Here I was with a deep father wound already, because I grew up in a volatile household with an alcoholic father who I never related to. I very much viewed him as a monster for the ways he treated my mom. And then to find out that he wasn't my biological father. So that set me kind of back to the beginning. And eventually, I will say the aftermath eventually led me to a new path of healing and a recognition that our journeys are never done. We're never done with the lessons. We can teach ourselves competencies to be ready, to be resilient. However, there's so many unknowns about what's going to come our way, and we don't know how they're going to flatten us. We don't know what's going to bring us to our knees. And for me, it's really shifted me to be more go with the flow, peaceful, here in the moment. I really don't plan beyond today. I just go with what I'm faced with today. And it ended up being a very much a reawakening and gosh, an unraveling, I would say. And so I don't want to sugarcoat it. It was a very tumultuous time for me in confronting my mom, eventually meeting this man who was my biological dad who didn't know about me. So he didn't know. Him and my mom were teenagers in high school and hadn't, he had never heard any inkling that I might be his. And so it definitely unlocked quite a few wounds for many of us.
Wow. And that would be a huge, that opening that can of worms. So did your biological mother raise you then?
Yes. So my biological mom, she was only 16 when she was 15 when she got pregnant, and she was 16 when she had me. She raised me, and she met the father that I thought was mine when I was just a few months old. So, part of the wound really is that our family back then all knew this. Anybody that knew my mom back then, so grandparents, aunts, their coworkers, their community, so this was not a secret per se. It was just something that I was never told. And so what that did for myself and then also my two younger brothers, they also felt, betrayed in this family secret. And so it really did, the wound ran very deep in unlocking it, addressing it, and then essentially healing in the aftermath of what that kind of led to.
Wow. Okay. That is just mind-blowing. My
Yeah.
mind, my heart is kind of going into what your mother must have experienced
Oh,
being so young and
yes.
dealing with such huge life problems.
Yep.
Bringing a child into the world is huge, life-changing.
Yes. Yep.
And then this child had health problems from the beginning.
Right.
And that is a lot to
A lot.
carry, a
Yes.
lot to carry. And that may
Yes.
have led to her finding someone else to help her
Of
uh,
course.
support and hopefully love. We all want to be loved. It doesn't work out the way that
Yes.
we want, but
Of
oh
course.
man.
Yes,
Okay.
and I so appreciate your words about my mom because I think for your listeners, my mom's part of this story has been so healing for me. People ask me, one of the questions I'm asked often on this topic is, do I still have a relationship with my mom? I must be so angry with my mom. I never felt anger with her. That's not what I felt. My heart broke for her as much as it broke for me in recognizing how young she was and knowing that she's lived her whole life with this secret and how that must have just damaged her. As much as I've learned how hurtful secrets are, it's been really neat for me to now see her on the other side, us having healed this secret and released it from her. I feel like to me it was holding her back, almost keeping her stuck at being a young girl. And I feel like she has a whole different lease on life, no longer having that burden. And that's been beautiful for both of us.
Oh, Megan, you are amazing. And you brought up some more incredible things to talk about. One is blame. And
Mhm.
how normal and natural it is to, especially when we look back at our upbringing and realize the mistakes that were made and
Yep.
how that affected us personally and deeply. To
Yes.
be able, the knee-jerk response is blame. Oh, it's your fault my life is such a mess.
Yes. That's
And
right.
and although I think it's okay to go there for just a second, I think it's
Yes.
part of the awakening process.
Yes.
We don't need to stay there. In fact, it
That's right.
doesn't do anybody any good if we stay there, including ourselves, which matters the most. Well, everybody
Yes.
matters, but we're in
Yep.
charge of our story. So for my story, I matter the most. And
Yeah.
so if we can get over the blame and just learn how to love and heal, and how
Mm.
beautiful that your healing spread
Yes.
and that it helped not only you, but it helped your mom. And as
Mm.
you mentioned, that weight being lifted because you know it was a weight. Wow.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is super, super huge. Okay, so we have talked quite a bit about the mess that happens to us,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the mess we create and how
Yeah.
normal and natural it is to try to fix ourselves in some ways that aren't very healthy. Can you talk about that just a little bit more
Of
about,
course.
I don't know, kind of the process that we go through and at what point do you realize this is not really helping me?
Yeah, for me, what I've come to, I mean, I think this is the heart of becoming is my philosophy. And the reason I'm doing what I'm doing with my story is because I want to make it okay to talk about the messes that we create. I believe that it's one of our biggest things holding our country back. I think it's part of our toxicity in this country right now. To me, it's at the heart is a lack of self-love is I think at the heart of so much of our country's ugliness. And so for me, for so many years, I mentioned I started drinking in the sixth grade is when I was exposed to alcohol, and I myself started drinking at the same time is when I started having, stuff with boys that was very promiscuous, so all the boys that wouldn't talk to me at school behind closed doors, they would talk to me. And so that was where I found love. And that is how I grew up to define my self-worth was being chosen by boys in secret. And that got ingrained in me at a very young age. And for moments in time, it numbed my pain. And, what I found was eventually behind closed doors became not secrets. And, I started being labeled as a slut. I was labeled with many not nice words. And, it was so conflicting as a child who at the end of the day, I couldn't get the love in the outside world. And so I could only find glimmers of it in secret. And it was surviving, So obviously, when I was little, I didn't have all these words, All I knew is that I felt sick to my stomach all the time. I just felt like if the world knew my secrets, that it would run from me, that I would be shunned. And the turning point for me really was in that nursery room, hearing that voice. That led into a couple of years of other spirals. I ended up having marital affairs, still drinking heavily. However, the pain got so heavy for me that I finally started confiding in my closest friends. And for me, that was a huge turning point in realizing all of the things that I thought made me a bad person were me really trying to just love myself, trying to find in all the wrong places. And it took trusted friends hearing the worst of me, at least the things I thought that were the worst of me. And what it did was they didn't run. They in turn shared their hurt. They shared their shameful experiences. And here I am 12 years later, and I'm now telling the stories on a broader scale because it's just been it's been almost a movement, I feel like, of just people's truth. And it started out with friends. And the more people I share my truth with, the more good I feel like it brings. And so I think that's the message is that for anybody listening that's holding on to secrets, the secrets are what's keeping you small. The worst thing that's going to happen when you tell your truth, it isn't the fears you have. It's really going to be the thing that sets you free.
Wow. Okay. That is so important and so amazing. And as I was listening to you talk about how everything was in secret, and I thought, and here you are openly,
Right.
publicly saying, here I am. Here are
Yes.
the mistakes that I've made. Here is my
Yep.
mess. And you know what? I can still love myself.
That's right.
And we mentioned before that our mess can come from two sources. One is what happens to us, and then the
Yep.
mess we create. And we
Yes.
talked about blame. It is normal and natural when something happens to us to blame. And we
Yes.
also talked about how that healing, because the blame doesn't work. Well, now the same thing is true with the mess that we make. And the mess
Yep.
that we make, the blame, I think, hurts deeper
Yes.
because the only person that we can blame is ourselves.
Yeah.
I made this mess.
Yes.
And it
Therefore, I
takes
am bad.
exactly. And it takes first, I think, a lot of humility to be able to even admit,
Yeah.
I made this mess. But then,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, our natural response is that means I'm bad. So
Yes.
it's kind of a lose lose. I
That's
lose
right.
if I admit it, and I lose because of what that makes me. And what
Yes.
we're saying is, okay, let's look at this from a broader perspective. Why did I do what I do?
Yes.
I was searching for love. I was
Yeah.
trying to fill a hole. I want to be loved.
Mm.
And we search for that, trying to fill that hole.
Yeah.
And as you've mentioned, and I'll just reiterate, we need to start by loving ourselves.
That's right.
That is how we fill the hole. There is no other person, no other substance, no other circumstance that's going to fill that emptiness. It's our job.
That's right.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Oh,
Yes. And
you are
I'll give
amazing.
you one more, Linda. Another kind of part two to that is once I started opening up and telling my secrets and releasing them, it also allowed me to look back at the messes I was creating, or the look back at the people that were part of those, and really dig into the why and find the lessons in them. I've really come to believe that all of us have messes in our journey, and I think that what our soul nudges us towards, it's nudging us towards life lessons, and sometimes it's nudging us towards a messy, not perfect, politically correct action. And so I think that's just part of the human experience. And I think it's just such a travesty that we don't talk about that. We love to celebrate, a comeback story and how far somebody's risen from their beginning, but we just don't let people openly talk about the middle without shame. And I think that is holding us back in many ways.
Ooh, that's very astute. Yes. And the middle takes time.
Yes.
And being
Yeah,
stuck in the middle, oh my gosh, it can take a while.
that's right.
So I loved the just, I'm thinking about self-love and
Yeah.
I'm thinking about with the mess. And it's almost a paradox where we have to love ourselves exactly as we are with all the mistakes that we've made.
Yeah.
And we don't leave ourselves in that mess. We don't want to keep creating those same problems.
Yeah.
And sometimes people think, well, if I love myself as I am, then that means I don't have to change anything.
Yeah.
I'm perfect the way that I am.
Yeah.
And if I have to do something or change something, then that means I can't love myself now because I am not yet the thing I want to be.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a paradox we kind of
That's
have to
right.
wrap ourselves around. I love myself right here, right now, exactly as I am. And
Yes.
because I love myself, I know that I am worthy of becoming the person I want to be. And
That's it.
it's a two-part thing. Now, one
Mm.
of the things you talk about is perfectionism, how sometimes we use that as a path. We're trying to earn our way into being worthy. Do you want to expound on that a little bit? Because I know that
Yes.
applies to a lot of people.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think until I heard this message and really got in touch with my inner voice, my inner critic was loudest. I don't think I really knew my inner voice before. And the inner critic in me really kept me externally getting validated by the world. And so here I was behind the scenes, drinking and having affairs and being quite a mess. Yet out in the world, I was a straight A student. I was top of my class. I eventually had a great career. And so externally, that perfectionism was the external validation I was seeking, telling me I was enough. And so if I could get a promotion, if I could get an award at school, if I could get accepted to a good college, those external validations were the way I measured my external love, and that meant I was successful. And to me, for me, the perfectionism paired with the way I was struggling at home. That disconnect between who I showed up out in the world and then at home, I was miserable with my first marriage. I was drinking too much, piling up these secrets. I think that realizing that there was still two of these two people, two versions of myself, and that I was fearful that if anybody found out the other version, that all those successes and all that perfectionism would come crumbling down. to me, that was part of the awareness of recognizing that that was no longer going to keep working. I needed to resolve and recognize that I'm a whole being. And if I can't be my true self in both spaces and at home and out at work, then I feel like I'm out of alignment. And that was really where the conflict was coming from. So that's what I would challenge with perfectionism is, is that perfectionism coming at a cost? Are you exhausted? Do you feel like you're hiding parts of yourself? Do you feel like in that perfectionism, you're feeling inauthentic and you're not following your inner voice? So if you have that misalignment, that I think is a sign that you're using perfectionism as a survival mechanism instead of living your authentic life.
Mm, that's a wonderful thing to take a look at ourselves. Like, why do I do what I do?
Mm,
Why do I think I need to be perfect?
yes,
Because the
yes,
truth is, none of us are,
yeah,
but we want to look that way.
yeah,
And
that's right. It's so important to love yourself simply for being you.
Mhm.
Like I feel like I've had humbling experiences this last year. I left a big titled paycheck a year ago. And, without that paycheck, without that job title, old me was so tied up my identity with titles. And to strip that away and no longer have that corporate income and title, I need to be able to stand on just me as me, and that's it. And I think that that's an exercise. Not everybody has to leave their job, but to really kind of confront yourself, whether it's through therapy or just in your own reflections, but to really confront, are you at peace with just you alone? Strip away all the titles because at any day you could lose your job, you could lose your marriage. And so at the end of the day, you can lose all the identities you've built up. Are you okay being just you without them?
Wow. And then we have to think of who am I?
That's right.
Wow. And
That's
am
right.
I enough? Am
And
I
am I
enough?
enough? And the answer is yes. You are just enough just by being you. That's all. And
Isn't
even
that
in your messes, even when I was messing up, even when I still mess up. I don't know what my next mess will be, but there will be something. And that doesn't make me not enough just because I make mistakes in life. It makes me human.
and we are choosing now here to give anybody listening permission to be human.
That's
We
right.
don't need to be ashamed of being human.
Yep.
We are. We are.
Yep.
Would you mind giving us just a little bit of an overview of your level up framework? I think it's so
Sure.
beautiful.
Yes, of course. So Level Up is an acronym. The framework is called the Imperfect Level Up Framework because imperfect, because it's not a one and done. These are not like steps 1 through 7. These are just 7 competencies that I help women focus on to learn how to love themselves. And these were essentially the path I followed. They didn't have a name yet, but when I had that calling in the nursery, that's the first one, which is let your inner voice lead and really working on getting in touch with your inner voice. And I love this. I keep hearing this quote lately that says, your inner voice speaks in statements and your inner critic and anxiety speaks in question marks. And I think
Mm.
that that's a really good way. If you're not sure about the two, that's one way to think about it. But, meditation, long showers, walks in nature, do whatever you can to really tease out and quiet that inner critic is the first competency. From there, explore your childhood as an observer and really be able to look back at your past and everybody in it, yourself, all the players in your past, look at it as you would the child in your life you love most. Give them that same grace as you look back on your experiences. I did this with a therapist. That was what I needed for this work. But it's amazing to go back and just love your inner self that you used to be so hard on. The next one is V, value the lessons, even the messy ones. This was me going back and looking at all those affairs and seeing what I took from them. Why did I keep repeating that pattern? And that's what helped me realize that I was just searching the world for somebody to love me. And that was a very powerful, even though the messy lesson itself might not be the prettiest, and it's certainly something that's very shamed in our country. But when people are having affairs, there's a wound that there's a reason they're doing it. And so give yourself grace, look back and see what the lesson is. The next one is fun. Embrace the magic of the universe. Once you start doing this work and you start healing those wounds, it gets so fun because the universe comes and meets you and it starts showing you signs. I say that it's hugs from the universe validating that I'm on the path. And so, numbers start showing up in repetition, certain songs play. So read up on all of those like synchronicities, the secret, all of that woo-woo stuff that you might be kind of unsure about. Just find some of those topics and see what piques your interest because it's going to be fun then to start seeing the universe telling you you're on the right path. The last ones are so L is lean into your unique healing needs. As you go through this journey, you're going to find maybe talk therapy isn't solving everything. So for me right now in this season of my life, I do a ton of work on my nervous system. And so I do something called craniosacral massage, which is massage actually targeting my nervous system. I do that once a month just to get some external help to keep my nervous system. You've heard all of my trauma. So, my body holds a lot from my past. And that's going to be a lifelong thing I have to navigate to help make sure my nervous system is taken care of. But for you, that might be different. And the last two for up is unapologetically love your authentic self, which is that's you starting to tell your story. Those things that bring you the most shame, start finding those trusted people, that friend that you know is never going to judge you, and just start testing, opening up about your story. That's going to help you build self-trust and it's going to help free you of those secrets. And that's going to be what helps you really love yourself. And then last, it's just passing this on. This kind of work becomes contagious. So many of us that are life coaches say the same thing. I never really was seeking out to be a life coach, but people kept on asking me what my secret is. And so this work is contagious. When you love yourself, other people want to know what's the secret pill you're taking. And so share your insights. I think it's how we help the whole world love itself.
I love that. And in a nutshell, the secret pill is I love myself.
That's
And
it.
this is
Yes.
how I learned how to love
Yes.
myself
Yes. Yes.
because it
Yes.
can be a journey.
It can be a journey, and it's okay to have some tools up your sleeve to help you with this. It's hard to love ourselves. The world, I think, in many ways tells us all the reasons we shouldn't love ourselves, and so it's okay to have some tools to help you do that. But I will say, once
Absolutely.
you do it, it gets a lot easier.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
Meghann, this has been amazing. Is there
Thank you.
anything else you want to make sure we cover before we close today?
I think closing with the framework, I think is it feels really like a good place. But I hope people check out the Becoming is Messy podcast. I would say that in the first bunch of episodes of that, I do a deep dive in the framework. And so if you're looking for some actuality of how to leverage the framework, there's just a free resource. Go check out those episodes, and it'll help give you some specific tools that you can use to start embodying that framework yourself.
Thank you, Meghann. This has been
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you, Linda.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Kerry Washington. She said, I don't have to be perfect. All I have to do is show up and enjoy the messy, imperfect, and beautiful journey of my life.
Mm.
Today, I invite our listeners to embrace and enjoy the messiness of becoming. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.